Click here. I think that's on. All right. What's up, everybody? In today's video, all right, we are here for episode 2 of House of the Dragon. Oh my gosh. Not to spoil it for you, but this one was so brutal, you guys. I found myself multiple times throughout the episode, like screaming at the screen, just being like, oh my fucking God. Oh my fucking God. We have a lot to talk about. This episode, woof, 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 woof. I don't really know where to start. But a lot of things to say here. First of all, the episode titled "The Rogue Prince" is how can I put this? Okay, the only other sort of commentary and review I've seen on this episode was I briefly caught a live stream of Nerdrotic last night where they were kind of talking about it, and they had some of the similar criticisms I had, but on the whole, they thought it was like a pretty strong episode, and I like really didn't see that at all. We have some major issues with this show, and made me kind of depressed. I was watching it with a friend of mine who has never seen Game of Thrones and has never seen or read any of this material, and I think he got like maybe 5 minutes into it and then was like, yeah, I'm gonna go do something else because it was brutal, but we'll just start from the beginning. Let's see here. So they finally did an introduction. I had mentioned in the last stream, I was like, I wonder if they do sort of the similar Game of Thrones introduction with the sort of like Minecrafty movement with the music. And they did, but it wasn't it wasn't good, you guys. And it's so frustrating because I feel like these companies, these streaming services, they have these like multi-million-dollar budgets, and I'm like, where does this fucking money go to? Because clearly they're not giving it to any type of like editors, or like I don't know what they do with the fucking money, but this was bad. So anyways, they do this sort of intro thing, and it has this sort of blood like running through these sort of rocks. I don't know if they were trying to symbolize like the interconnectedness of the bloodlines running through different houses or something, but it seemed like they were it was a long intro, and it was just like this blood moving through the rocks, and I felt like I was seeing the same sort of frames and the same sort of movement like every like 4 seconds or so, and it just like went on and on and on. I thought it was like building to something sort of cool, but like it never happened. On top of that, they just overlaid the same exact score from Game of Thrones, and the laziness is un oh, it's so frustrating. Like what I would have done, okay, say you want to use the Game of Thrones score, I would have taken out like most of the instrumental and maybe just had like like cello, maybe a little bit of flute, and made it a little bit maybe eerier, a little different, maybe go up an octave higher or something. But they literally just like, it was almost like I took my microphone, it sounded like this too, and just like recorded like the last intro of the last episode of the last season, and then just was like, okay, click and drag, and we're going to put it here in iMovie, and then they sent it over to HBO, and they signed it off, and they were like, oh my God, I love it so much. So the intro was bad. All right. And the next part is just the same criticism I've had with so many things, including the last episode, and that has to do with the script writing and the dialogue. Okay, it took us over 30 minutes to get outside of the castle in King's Landing called the Red Keep. Okay, it was just dialogue after dialogue after like dialogue, and the dialogue was so fucking brutal. I'm not even like, I want to like the show. I'm like willing to look past some things to just be like, okay, I'm kind of picky. The gays can be kind of picky, and I'm like not even trying, and I'm trying to like follow this show, and like I said earlier, I'm like screaming at it. I'm like, why are you talking like this? It's it's such the show like spent like 30 minutes just going back and forth with just like so much dialogue that wasn't written well. And I don't know if this is just like modern sort of like culture or what, but everyone thinks that everything is verbal. There's no, they don't do any type of like non-verbal direction, or maybe they're having some sort of conversation and something else is happening at the same time. But no, it's like they're talking about something, and then the next scene is them talking about the same thing with different people, and then the next scene is like them talking about the same thing. It's so brutal. I don't know how to even describe it. Not to mention, They kept going on and on and on about these dead women, like my dead mother, my dead mother. Oh, I'm so sad about my dead mother. And they used like the same. They just kept going on and on and on throughout the entire episode about like mourning these bitch women. And the other phrases too. They kept being like, "You're the king, but you're the king. I am the king. You're the king. I am the king. You're the king." And just like listening to it, it's so bad. The dialogue is like, I don't know, like what type of Downs person, like they actually someone with like probably 50 extra chromosomes could have done a better job. And you can tell like the writers are women, or at least like the majority of them are women, just in how they write. Like you can hear it on the screen, and it's so bad, you know? And yeah, so the dialogue is written very poorly. Like I said, it took us over a half an hour, more than half the episode, to get out of the castle, and all of this just like heavy dialogue to sort of like set stuff up. But it was stuff that like then got set up and then resolved in the same episode, and it just the pacing is so not there, non-existent. So again, just like brutally slow. The dialogue doesn't make sense, and then they throw in this little minor sort of dragon segment, which was done beautifully well. You know, like how they did. The dragon kind of comes up out of the mist, and the dragon stuff was really good. However, it just felt sort of like cheap and just sort of like this like quick insert to just wake you up again and be like, yep, I remind you that this is a dragon show. And that's the something I didn't talk about in the last episode, but I was curious of how they would like introduce the dragons, and how they would sort of how they would get across the how the dragons and like their own bloodlines are intertwined in this sort of mystical connection. But the first episode sort of like opened with Rhaenyra like flying in on her dragon, but then you don't know like who other family members, like which of the other family members has dragons. You don't we haven't really seen them yet, which is fine. But I would have almost rather seen like all the family like riding in on their dragons, and seeing like maybe the little like sort of saplings sort of like struggling to keep their rider afloat, and then like the big dragons, and then you sort of see you don't really get that at all. In this episode, you have like 35 minutes of just straight dialogue, and then this insertion of like beautifully done, you know, but this dragon stuff, and then it's just like back to the castle and back to heavy dialogue. And I don't really know how a show called like House of the Dragon, they haven't like introduced the dragons really, you know. They just it's sort of like this like implied thing. It's hard to describe, but the dragon, how they're interweaving the dragons so far seems very choppy, and they're just sort of like throwing it in there once again to just sort of like wake you up, you know, because the show is so fucking boring. It's so boring. The house. Let's see here. There's a character called Mysaria. She's the whore of Prince Prince Daemon Maga Targaryen. His character is probably the coolest. It's played by Matt Smith, and he does a very well. He does a great job, and he really carries a lot of the show. But he's like this badass sort of yeah, just sort of like the black sheep of the family, I guess you could say. Daemon Maga Targaryen. And anyways, his sort of bitch whore, her voice. First of all, just like her on screen, she's just like looking like she always has this like look on her face, like she's like either about to like rip a fart, or just like her face is just always sort of like contorted, like unhappy, you know, just like sort of whatever, which doesn't really say much. But then when there's like the one scene where she's like talking, her voice is so fucking annoying. I was screaming at the TV. I'm like, make it stop, make it stop. How the hell do they have someone play this role whose voice is just so unpleasant on the ears? And not only that, you can't really understand really what she's saying. It's brutal. It's so brutal. Then we come to the diversity. All right, remember they completely changed Corlys Valerian's character, and they just made him black. You know, a black guy with huge blonde dreadlocks, yet all his facial hair is still like black. It's very bizarre. But this was like uncomfortable and like very very noticeable. But so okay, he you know, he's like a pretty prominent character. in the book and in the film. But again, they just like made him black because of diversity's sake. Yet in this episode, there was like 4 or 5 times where he's like openly talking about how he has the oldest and most noble blood. Like we come from old Valyria, and we are of the purest stock. And um, it was just very weird. Like I don't really understand why the one black character is the only character in the series talking about um, their sort of blood. It doesn't really make sense either, because you'll get people in the comments like, "Can't you just see past the race part? Can't you just see past the race part?" And like you try, right? But then, like, then they want you to look past all of that, but at the same time, like, be able to maintain the idea that like bloodlines exist, and like it does. My brain is just like, I can't fucking do this. So he just kept saying like, basically like the whole "we was Kangs" thing, and it just felt really uncomfortable. And in the comment section of the Nerdrotic live stream I was listening to last night, so many other people agreed with what I was saying. It was like, how come the one black character in the series that was inserted in there because of wokeism is like the one having this dialogue about how his blood is the purest, and how he's just this ancient race. And it doesn't really make sense, because he's fucking black. And all these other people, it's like, what do you mean that they share the same bloodline? Like, you aren't even like the same fucking species. It's so hard to follow that. And again, I could put all of that behind me, but then why do you have that character be the one to talk about like the blood purity? I know it's like so old to be like, oh, imagine if the roles were reversed. But if the roles were reversed, it would, I don't know, very crazy. Again, the feminism, wokeism is out of control. It's basically the whole episode read to me like an episode of Ugly Betty, or like Emily in Paris, or some other series where it's this sort of like nerdy, quirky, smart girl who is in this environment, sort of like way over her head, but she's surrounded by all these silly men who just don't get it. And she's the one that comes in there and saves the day. Just like super simply, like no blood on her hands. And it's very, 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 very hard to follow, because like there was this one scene where they're talking about how they're having issues with pirates, and like what they should do about it. And she just like suggests to the room of all men, she's like, well, how about the dragons? And they sort of look at her like, you silly girl, like why would we use dragons to fight the pirates? And this is what I mean about the introduction to the dragons. I'm like, how can that be like a surprise that you would think, oh, maybe we should use dragons to deal with these pirates? But they haven't really explained the dragons much in I struggle even reviewing this because it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. And like I said, the episode read to me like this Ugly Betty thing, where the girl, the little Rhaenyra, she's like in this fashion world, and everyone's sort of like making fun of her and trying to thwart her, but she's the one that comes in there through like goodwill and hard work. She just comes in there and saves the day. And it doesn't translate at all. This is episode 2, and I think I said that I'll give it to like after episode 3 to sort of make a more sound judgment on where this show is going. But from what I could see in the trailer for next week, I think they're just going to throw a whole bunch of sort of dragon CGI on there to get people to again overlook the serious lapses in the quality of the show. I mean, the bar is so low. I mean, we're talking about a mediocrity that is again, with like such huge budgets. I'm like, where are they hiring these people? I, sitting there watching the show, could like multitask, and I was already coming up with words for them that they should be saying or not saying. That was so much better than what I was getting on the screen. And I'm just some fucking fag in the middle of Wisconsin. You know what I mean? Like, who the hell is writing these shows? It's so bad. But anyways, yeah, we talked about how they go on and on about their dead mother and how sad they are about how mama died. But this is also supposed to have taken like six months later. And they really, this show is struggling. There are some set designs that are very cool, and some of the costume designs are really cool. Like I mentioned, this sort of dragon scene that they threw in there. The young Rhaenyra, she sort of gets off her dragon and is walking up, and she's in this sort of sick. The costume design is there, and some of the like ideas are there, but then they just fumble, and then also there's like little criticisms too, where the camera will just sort of like linger and pause like unnecessarily long in certain instances, which don't need to be there. It's like they're adding like a second or two that don't of a frame that it's so unnecessary. And that's where I'm like, where are the editors here, and why isn't this like cleaned up? And like we keep saying, whether in regards to fashion or film or anything, if we're going to do something simple, it has to be perfect. And to see them fumbling with like really easy concepts, and again, the dialogue where they could, in my opinion, like when you're dealing with like episodes 1, 2, 3, 4, like specifically, you need to show like the characters like in their world and how they're like interacting in the world. It doesn't necessarily have to be 100% plot building, but you need to get more of the depth of their character and how they interact outside of the castle and how they interact. You don't get that at all. It's just straight dialogue of these people just like to try to advance the plot forward. And it's brutal. I'm sorry, this review is probably like all over the place, but that's how like watching it feels. I'm just like, I don't know, and I want to like the show. I want to like the show so bad. I enjoyed the book, I enjoyed Game of Thrones for the most part, and I'm like, okay, they have this whole book. They have George R. R. Martin himself sitting there, which confuses me too, because I'm like, how the hell is he signing off on all this crap? You have all of this help, all of this money. It's like no limits, no cap, no cap, and yet they still are stuck in like this amateur hour. And if it wasn't for like the dragon like bits, this show, oh, so brutal. But anyways, I'm gonna leave it there. I have some comments. Oh my gosh. Hey Kevin, what's up, buddy? How are you? Rockshot, how's it going, man? I'm not going to watch it, just checking in on my boy. Yeah, I think maybe if you've once the whole thing comes out and you want to just sort of binge it, I was almost wanting to like fast forward. I never like there's no really no point to watching this show right now if you haven't seen Game of Thrones or anything like that. Wait till the end and maybe watch it as a like on a rainy Saturday or something. But there's no scenes that I wanted to go back and rewatch this morning, like the morning after. The dragon sequence I could maybe go back and watch, but again, that was like 30 seconds, of an hour show. There weren't like great like dialogue acting moments, and people seem to really like the Patty Constantine character who plays King Viserys. And I think in the first episode he had maybe a couple sort of moments, but he's really not great for that part. The only actress or actor for that matter that so far I thought is doing well is the actress who plays Alicent Hightower. For some reason, I get like Hermione Granger vibes from her, like Emma Watson vibes. I don't know if it's just because she's a brunette Brit, but and maybe I'm like biased approaching her character that way. But the young Alicent Hightower, as much as her in real life, she's like woke as fuck and so fucking annoying. But on screen, I think she's doing a really good job. But they're just like not using the full potential of her, and I don't know. Then of course you have Black Corus Valerian, who just looks like Whoopi Goldberg, and he's not that good of an actor at all. And people again are like, you just gotta look past the race part. He's a competent actor and he's carrying the role. And again, I really don't see it. I'm not trying to be brutal. I'm not trying to be super critical. Y'all know I can be nitpicky as fuck, but I'm not hopeful for the show. I think we'll get some like cool sort of like dragon YouTube clips that you can go watch after the fact. And I'm almost kind of thinking like, should I cancel my HBO subscription and just like pirate it the next day because it's not that exciting, or just look for like clips on YouTube of the dragon parts, because this is going to be brutal getting through all of this. And this is like we've said this all the time, but you almost don't want Hollywood to touch some of your more treasured books and stories, because when you look forward to it, and this is what they produce, it makes you think like maybe you shouldn't be making movies and stuff like this. They're the people on like Tumblr, the people like on these like fan fiction sites are so much more creative and imaginative, and they actually enjoy the material. Like it almost seems like the people writing the dialogue, like they don't seem to even like the story in the first place. It's hard to follow. Anyways, I think I'm gonna leave it there. We'll be back here next Monday to review episode 3. Like I said, that's going to sort of be the telltale cutoff for me because I think there's only 10 episodes. So if after episode 3, which I think is just going to be a lot of dragon insertions to keep you interested, and just probably shitty dialogue again. Anyways, I love you all so much, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.